to episode 1 of the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Helanius J Wilkins, an award-winning choreographer, performance artist, innovator, and educator. He currently is an associate chair and assistant professor of dance at CU Boulder. He's a member of the National Board of Directors of the American College Dance Association for the Northwest region and was appointed in 2018 by Governor Jared Polis to the Colorado Council on Creative Industries. Please enjoy Helanius J Wilkins. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm Mari Riesberg, and I'm here today with Helanius Wilkins, who I met, did we discover like 4 years ago?
I think so.
Something
yeah,
like that.
I think it was 4 years ago.
When I was guest lecturing at University or
CU Boulder,
Colorado University Boulder, in a joint dance and acting department workshop.
It was a course called Professional Orientation, and it is offered to. There's a section for the theater side and a section for the dance side, and periodically we merge the two sections for special workshops.
So yes, that's where we met and became really good friends from that
along the way.
It was awesome. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm really excited to chat with you about creativity. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing and who you are?
Sure. So as you said, I'm Helanius J Wilkins, based in Boulder. I am a choreographer, a performance artist, an educator. I'm also the associate chair and an assistant professor of dance at CU Boulder. I have been in the area for about 4 years. And let's see, I'm terrible at talking about myself, but...
Okay, I'll pepper you with, so what did you do before?
Yeah, exactly. Those great things. So, I essentially relocated to Boulder from Washington, D.C. via Texas and Pennsylvania. But I lived in D.C. for 18 years, and I was a full-time, and still am, full-time artist, but in a different capacity. I ran a company for 13 years, Edgeworks Dance Theater. And it was the first all-male dance company of primarily African-American men in DC, second in the nation to my knowledge, some from my research, and that original group existed in the 1950s for about 5 years, and they were called the Negro Dance Theater. My work has always been about sense of belonging and identity and community, and so it has morphed and evolved in different ways, but still that's an anchor in my work. I would say if I was asked to describe my work right now, it's about the intersections of American contemporary dance, cultural identities, and the identities of Black men.
Nice. I don't know that I've heard that wrapped up so well before. I like it.
Every once in a while I'll pull something out.
Perfect. We'll capture the nuggets today. Nice. Well, yes, you have quite an extensive history also in working with performers, young artists, as well as professional artists. And I had the privilege of coming and seeing your last work that you did.
Multiscapes.
Yes, Multiscapes. That was so incredibly, thought-provoking and held my curiosity, made me really question, what's coming next, and it was interactive, and that aspect was super, super cool. But my favorite part of it was the first section with the amplified walls that you had. That was pretty spectacular and made me want to have an amplified wall in my house.
Cool. I think you should have one.
I think so too.
Then when you don't feel like talking, just,
amplify the
surfaces.
Perfect.
That, speaking of multiscapes, I mean, it illuminates another aspect of what I do. Again, it's so rooted in the way in which I wrapped up and described my work, because I was very much about community through a different experience. But that particular work gives insight to my interest in dance and technology. And this is about creativity. So like, what does it mean to imagine creating spaces that are fully sensory and that tap into multiple intelligences and that engages or requires audiences to interact in a different way? Because so often when thinking about performance, for some, or for many, it might be proscenium. I'm going to be entertained. I'm going to sit in a seat. I'm going to enjoy something. It might even be a mark of a certain kind of class for some people, that I'm going here because it's what I'm supposed to do. And with my making and my work, it's really about everybody being on the grounds, including myself. So not sort of blurring the lines between the audience and artists, and transforming that idea so that you can, if you were to stop and think about it, you might actually discover that you're a performer in my work. And so Multiscapes did that in a very interesting way, because it's a work where I don't describe it as a performance. I don't describe it as a show. I actually describe it as a field trip, and field trip through space. And that I wanted people to initially feel something before actually seeing something, since that's the expectation when you're going to an event, is to see first.
And I love that you call it a field trip, because that's kind of what it felt like, going through 3 different spaces. And that unknown, being in the unknown, is really challenging for people. And because their expectation of what something a performance should be or should look like, can really tilt you off kilter a bit.
Exactly.
When it's not what you expected. So
yeah. And
I really appreciated that.
Oh, great. And there's that, and you're making me think about the notion of going through something like that without being given all the guidelines ahead of time. Like, I think gross generalization here, we activate when we feel we understand the steps to everything. But when you're not given the steps, then it can be something that stifles any way of thinking about how to approach it, or whether or not I even should. And maybe the choice, because it feels safer, is to not engage. And so that's a whole nother, interesting side of the coin, because ultimately with Multiscapes, whatever you get out of the experience, you get out of the experience. I wasn't striving to tell a specific story, but the pieces, in terms of putting it together to lead audiences from one space into another space, was ultimately an experience in construction, right? So it's like you're introduced to dancers in this small space, and that gives you something familiar, and then we lead you into another space where that gets dismantled, and then we lead you into another space where you're actually having to you realize that you're having to activate the space, receive the invitation even to activate.
Really invited the audience, or the people who are there participating on a creative journey, and ask them to tap in, without words, to tap into their own creativity and play and innovation, and allow their idea of what is possible to really expand. in
Yeah.
terms of performance. And I thought that was a really beautiful gift to give people on the journey with you.
Yeah, how do we create invitations to remind us what makes us human is not a one side of a coin. There's actually another side, and that other side does not always come with rules. And it does not always come with something that is being rigid that you have to work at, but like it requires that we make time to test, to try, to submit to something that is where we don't know what is going to come out on the other side. And it's that balance. And so how are those spaces activated? And I feel like that's something I do in some of my works. I strive to create spaces for that kind of engagement, that I'm not treating my participants or audience members as voyeurs, but I am transporting you somewhere, and I'm asking you to, for lack of a better way to say it, show up, but show up in the way that you best know how to show up. I feel like growth and change emerges from discomfort. So we need it. Comfort allows us to be complacent. Comfort allows us to feel maybe even a false sense of security at times, because again, the landscape is still shifting. We're just not privy to it. And so, yeah, I think art is meant to do a lot of things, again, speaking from where I function, and it can entertain, but it can also cause us to question, and it can cause us to reflect, and it could disturb us to wake us up to, sort of reimagine or reframe what that picture is for ourselves, or what our understanding of something is. So yeah, and in some ways I'm thinking about the one question I did recognize, which is about what is creativity, and and thinking about that, and that maybe would change for me every day in terms of the words I would use. But in this moment, I feel like creativity is about moving and navigating with curiosity, and with imagination, and with an interest or a feeling of understanding that there's more than one perspective to any and everything that we're dealing with.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Really recognizing that my perspective of creativity is very different than your perspective of creativity. Both are valid, and there may be some crossover. Yeah. So when you kind of step into creative space, what do you notice shifts in you? Like going from, every day I'm brushing my teeth, I'm taking a shower, into, oh, this is my creative space. What shift happens for you?
That's a great question. I'm not, and I'm not sure if I know how to answer that, but what I can say is, in this moment, the shift, if there is such a shift, it's a deepening into what is already. It's not that suddenly I drop all those things. There's a saying that's been around for a long time around, leave things at the door before you walk into the dance studio, so that you can be fully present in a dance studio. But in actuality, in order to be fully present means showing up as you are. So it does require you to bring yourself into the space versus empty yourself out. And I understand that saying could also be connected to about distractions. Bring yourself in and let yourself be open to experiencing something. But there is this thing about what makes us whole, and how can, and how then can we engage with a practice that allows us to be truly our whole selves, because we need to access that in order to make those other things meaningful and to fully realize those things. So I would say that there is a deeper, maybe a more intense connection to my being when I step into a creative space. And depending on the situation and where my mind is, because sometimes I come in with, oh, I want to explore this. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what, but here I am.
Uh-huh.
Here I am. Let's just go, hit on the wall and see what happens. That might happen sometimes. But I come to the space with a curiosity to see what will be revealed to me. I come into the space with an interest in playing. And sometimes that playing, it covers the full range. It could be feel like it's brutal, or it could feel like it's so light and like I'm not doing anything, but I'm doing a lot, so like the range of everything becomes intensified. Like I feel access to all of that.
Yeah. Also, it sounds like you also have an openness to being surprised or being transported somewhere that you weren't expecting, and allowing and having the self-awareness to say, oh, I'm going to follow this urge, or I'm going to follow this impulse to see where it goes and where it leads me. And maybe it'll take me to some incredible, amazing place, and maybe it won't, and we won't know until we try.
Right. And that, to some degree, initially I have to let go of caring about that. Because if I'm caring about that in the initial steps, then I'm trying to drive the creativity to function and to fit into a box in a certain way. And I don't even know what the box is. So I actually have to let go of all those things. And that's perhaps, I love that. I thrive on that. But when I zoom out, we're on Zoom and we're zooming out.
Take a balcony view.
If I zoom out, that's maybe even part of the that underlying tissue that leads many to believe that they're not creative, because it can't be controlled in the way in which we might be able to control other things. Like we have to let creativity take the lead and shape itself. And we're essentially the tools to activate what is being asked of us. But so often, and not just so often, in a more quote unquote traditional sense of living and existing, we're able to do things because we have control of them. We know how to do it. We are the reason why it's happening.
Right.
And if we don't activate it, then it won't happen. And I think creativity flips that a little bit. And it turns it on its head and said, I'm going to give you a little bit of control because you have tools to mold it, but I'm not going to let you become the thing. I'm still going to lead you in a certain kind of way. And so often, again, with choreography and making work, I can come in with some themes that I'm really interested in, or relationships that I'm interested in, and that I embrace all of those as blueprints. Because blueprints can change and have to be redesigned. They're not the final map to make the work. The blueprint only opens the door, and then I have to be willing to walk through the door and understand that it's going to change every time I discover something. And so as a result of Multiscapes, we have this byproduct that's called the Conversation Series, and we're putting some of those back together as episodes, and we're creating another evening length work out of that.
When your experience of creativity is challenged, what do you do and how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think it's always challenged. I think that's the undercurrent. Macro funding is always a question, time is always a question, all those things. But then when you go into micro spaces, it again is submitting to uncertainty, and it's trusting that you'll be able to identify and create some sense of logic out of what's happening. And when I talk about choreography, I often talk about, I often define it in many different ways. And one of the ways I define it is problem solving for a given moment. Another one is that it's essentially a mathematical equation. Another version is that it's an algorithm, right? So I'm trying to put all these pieces together to actually make this other thing happen. So there's some, and all of those things are rooted in investigation. And all of those things are rooted in trying and testing, with the understanding that that test may fail, or it may actually open up a door for something else to happen. And so there's something about it for me, generally, that is very welcoming to challenges, because I think in challenges I learn about what the work is versus what I'm wanting to prescribe it to be. And the more I can give up control, I feel like the more I understand the work. And that would, for some people, they'll be like, wait, what? You know, like, you're a choreographer, you're the you need to know what you're doing. So, and I'm like,
expectation of you.
Right. And I'm like, that's not what I'm thinking about, you know? And that's not how I'm functioning inside of it. So I welcome the challenge, but I think what, you know, to answer your question in a different way, I think when I bump up against challenges, it's when it's asking me to be my most creative self. Like I have to come up with another way of navigating. I have to come up with another way of trying. I have to come up with another conversation to have with those that I'm working with, be it my collaborators or dancers. I have to reconsider what I thought was right. And let that feel wrong for a moment to understand what it can be, you know, like, so it's, it's a constant reframing, which is a word I use a lot around me.
I've heard it.
Yep. But I like that. It's like that. It's a weird way too, and not so weird. It ties me to part of what inspires me, and it's this it's architecture, right? And it's it's really space. It's how can I shift it? How can I redesign it? How can I reconfigure it to let it reveal something? Because I don't know what that thing is.
I mean, I love all of that. Your willingness to fail and have something be wrong and be surprised. And I mean, you're not the first person I've interviewed who's said that. And I love hearing these pieces continue to be repeated, because it reinforces like, oh yeah, there is some aspect within creativity of failure and being willing to go with it. But my question is, as an educator, when you're working with students or people in the dance world who do bump up against those creative blocks or challenges, how do you work with them in that space or through that? Do you have a specific thing that you do, or is it just kind of in the moment?
There's no one solution to anything. I would say that would be like, again, zooming out beyond the artists or the art world. When it comes to thinking about creativity, there's a way in which we function in quote unquote normal world where this is the way it's supposed to go, or this is the answer to the thing. Right. In creativity, this is not the answer to all the things. It's the answer to this moment, you know? And if we come back, reconvene tomorrow, like, that's not the answer. And then we can figure it again. So it's that thing. And so, I feel like there's it's constantly teaching us how to function with it. But to answer your question directly, it is partly having to consider what are the parameters that I'm working in, you know, to support the student, because each set of rules or each environment is very different. And it's not going to, whatever I have to say is not one thing that works across the board to problem solve everything. So I have to be available for that. A step before that, though, I think there's something about the teaching of failure not necessarily being a bad word, and failing forward is actually activation for creativity. Because you have to try. Failing forward.
Oh my God, I love that. That's like tagline.
There you go.
There you go. Forward today, everyone.
Right. You have to, you have to go into, the thing. And trust that you'll come out on the other side of it, and trust that you'll come out on the other side of it with more information, or not. Maybe it's that you have the same information, but you understand something slightly differently, or that information lives in you differently.
Yeah.
And that may open up a door to trying forward. So it's that I feel that's super important to encourage, educate around, activate that space, because failure could be received as a stopping point, as I can't do, a give up moment. And in creativity world, it's not. It's actually asking you to take me on.
Yeah. I like that. But the failing forward gives some permission and some freedom. Even just hearing failing forward, I feel more free to try something, that someone's supporting me to take a risk, to take a chance, even if it's really challenging and really difficult.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking back to before we officially started and was talking about the greater masses and the number of people who feel like they are not creatives. And I feel like this taps into that a little bit, because there is a space, and there is a body of beings who have difficulty giving themselves permission to try at anything that is not so clear cut for them. And so their creativity stops at that point because perhaps they don't feel they have the courage and the bravery to try something that they feel they don't know anything about. And when they think of artists or individuals who the creative types, it's maybe a false sensing that we understand something that they don't. And I feel the only difference is that we're willing to take the chance and try something.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think that idea of taking a chance could be with anything.
Yes.
Not just in the creative arts. It could be taking a chance in meeting someone new, or getting a pet, or planting a garden, or,
it's again, kind of ironic we're doing this at a time where we're going through a pandemic, but it's like also this being disoriented, being sort of fractured in terms of the way in which what we knew, and having to piece and create new systems for ourselves and new ways of existing to still function and thrive.
Right. Yeah. That, when you were talking about the chaos or pressure, or I thought about, the way a pearl is created under intense pressure, or a diamond, and something beautiful can come out of it. And being able to view creativity in that way as well, because I think there's a lot of pressure that you have to be creative, or this is asking for you to be creative, and from that pressure, pretty magnificent things have emerged for many people, not just in the arts, but when we think about innovation and people developing programs or technology, or how to utilize things around the world, I think many times there's a lot of pressure or discomfort or conflict that is driving it.
Well, there is that saying, I'm full of sayings today.
Bring it on.
That's about all I got.
Oh, please.
But there's a saying, anything worth having comes with hard work.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And, that is really real. And what's interesting is that, with the introduction of technology and then the advancement of technology, the languaging has always been around. It's making everything easier, and we don't have to really work for it, and we don't have to really, and so our relationship to resilience and our relationship to persistence and our relationship to endurance is all shifting, because these things are now quicker and faster to receive, and like it can also impact, like something, again, and it's not just with students, but using students as an example in broad stroke. There are some students that they don't have the patience to endure a long process because technology has cultivated or curated a life for them where they can get it in 3 seconds.
Right.
And if I don't get it in 3 seconds, then it's not worth my time, and that's not really the truth, right? So there's some reorientation too with creativity that comes back to, I have to be willing to make space, make the time to really be in it. It's not just an action of passing through and I can grab it and move on like I'm going in a grocery store and shopping, but I actually have to live with it for a while, and I have to be willing to be brave enough to let it reflect back to me who I may not want to think of myself as being.
Yeah. Yeah. It is an opportunity to see new aspects of yourself or to learn new things about yourself.
Right.
Then how it simmers or percolates in your system. And that image of going to the grocery store and pulling creativity off the shelf. I was like,
I'll have a little bit of that, a little bit of this.
I'm big.
All right, I'm set.
I mean, why not? Maybe there are pieces of creativity that are really easy or lower hanging to you than other aspects of it. So maybe there is a creativity grocery store.
I would agree with you totally. And I feel like even like using that in a different way too, as an extension of what you're sharing, is that the things you're pulling off the shelf are the things that you're willing to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have to be willing to try. The undercurrent of that, you have to be willing to try, and you have to be willing to give a little time to it. Because even in the simplest, the easier, lower hanging fruit situation, you still have to do something with it.
Right.
And if you're not willing to make the time to do that thing with it, then do you get that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my goodness, this has been so much fun. I love talking. I hope you're a little more awake now.
A little.
What is an everyday issue in your life that you have had to use creativity to solve?
There are so many. That's like my whole life. But here's one, and I think, again, I'm speaking from this place of where we currently exist in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm going back to a time in to where I am now, it was a struggle, and it still is, but it's a different kind of struggle. But, for people right now who are facing, how am I going to pay my bills?
Yeah.
That requires creativity.
100%.
And I believe wholeheartedly that many will be okay, and many will figure it out, and many will be on the other side of it, if not everybody. But I think that as a simple everyday task or monthly task of looking at what I have to pay and how much money I have to put towards my bills and what's essential, what's not essential, there's some reorganization, and that it can appear as being just functional, but you're actually being creative about how to solve what you need.
Yeah.
And versus what you want, but maybe need to hold off from doing a little bit longer. So I would say that's an example that can relate to everybody. Creativity around cooking is another one.
A personal one.
It's like I have these things, and I have a taste for different things that seemingly don't go together, but then I create something and it's tasty. And I love it.
Perfect. What's your secret to creativity?
That's a good one.
Right?
Really good. I must have to sleep on that, but in this moment, I'm going to come back to something I said earlier, because it's really the anchor for me. I move in the world with curiosity.
Yeah.
I move in the world as a student for life. And so there's always invitation for learning.
Yeah.
And when I learn something new, it gives me more ingredients to create with.
Ooh, that is, what a beautiful image that
Yeah.
brings for me. I love it. Nice. And even though we're in a pandemic right now,
Yeah.
are you working on any new things? Or if people want to get information or in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, this pandemic, in order to get through it, is going to require that we all access a sense of balance, and find outlets to experience joy and our smile and our laugh, because that's needed as well to be resilient and to be able to deal with the tasks at hand. So to that extent, for me, it's been a lot of future gazing with optimism and confidence, and matched with feeling in my soul, in my heart, and from, reflecting on things I've learned about history, how art and culture has been central to get to rebuilding, restoring, revitalizing, helping to define new senses of community. I'm focusing on the art. And so I do have two projects. One I mentioned earlier, which is the byproduct of Multiscapes, which is called the Conversation Series, that although we're not physically working, that project is a project that I'm focusing on and teaching myself more about as I'm looking at video footage and sharing conversations with writer. I've also been working on a multi-year project called Ritual Gumbo, a Passage, which is a trilogy. And when I'm done, it will have been about 10 years. So I did the first installment in 2012, the second in 2018. And the final installment, which is actually an ensemble work, which is very different from the first two installments, which were solo works, is scheduled to premiere in Michigan in March 2021. So I have something to look forward to. And again, I see that as a blueprint. Who knows what happens in this moment? Things can change, but we have something to work toward. So I'm working on the completion of that. And ironically enough, that is a work very much about sense of belonging and community. I would say that you can keep in touch with me and you can find out more about these projects through accessing my website, which I'm just launching a brand new version of the website. And it's www.helaniusj.com. And if anyone is interested in this, also it feels like giving birth to something that I've been imagining for a long time. The website includes the launch of an archives for Edgeworks Dance Theater, my company that I have for 13 years in DC, which is, again, significant in many ways. And I disbanded the company because I wanted to maintain that body of work, that history, those men. So you get to read about and see photographs and video footage. So it's a great resource.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me and sharing your pieces and ideas on creativity. And I love it. And I look forward to connecting more with you when we can, walk closer than 6 feet.
I know. Thank you. It has been a pleasure. No, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So thanks for inviting me and including me in what you're working on.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram as Sustaining Creativity. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Tag your friends, tag your family so they can listen as well. Leave your comments, reviews, and questions. We love hearing what you all have to say. And tune in Tuesdays for our next episode with the amazing Sean Colin Young. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.